We have been asked time and time again how we get the binding to look so nice on all of our quilts. Hi, I'm Natalie, owner of the Sewing Studio, and today we thought we would show you how we bind our quilts. Okay, so I brought my quilt over to the sewing machine, and one of our tricks, and one of the reasons that our binding looks so nice, is that we're going to sew our binding strip onto the back of our quilt first. And what's really important about that is we have a 3/8 inch seam. And you can get a seam gauge to measure that out and make sure that you have that 3/8 inch seam. On our baby locks, what we tend to do is use our J foot and line up with the inside of our foot here and keep our needle in center position. And that is a good 3/8 inch seam. So that gives it a little bit more width on the back so that when we bring it around to the front, it just looks nice on both sides. So I'm going to continue sewing here towards my corner with that 3/8 inch seam, and then I will show you how to make your corner turn when I get down here. So we're just going to continue using that 3/8 inch seam till we get to the corner. And when you're doing binding on a quilt, what you have to do is stop about 1/4 inch from the edge of your quilt top. So I'll come down, and about 1/4 inch from the end, I will stop and back stitch and then cut my threads. You can't just make your corner, you have to cut loose, and then we'll fold it so that it'll pull around to the front. So I'm about 1/4 from the end. I'm going to back stitch and cut it loose. So you're going to stop about 1/4 inch from the edge of your quilt so that we leave this little piece. And then you're going to take that binding strip and fold it up away from your quilt, creating a good 45-degree angle, and then fold it back down, making sure that you match the top edge of that fold with the quilt. Get our little strings out of the way. And then we're just going to take it back into our sewing machine, starting on the very back edge. And we'll start in. And I do back stitch at that edge. And then we'll continue sewing that 3/8 inch seam all the way around until we get back to that front edge. All right, and then we've left our tails long so that we can go and match our end pieces. So we'll take it over to the cutting mat, and I'll show you how to connect your beginning and end strips, and then we'll come back and sew that piece together. So now that we have made it around our quilt on the back side using that J foot, now we've got to get the two pieces from the beginning and the end to match up. So the trick here is, and a lot of people are scared of this, but it really does make a difference on your quilts. And we are going to take our binding piece here and lay it down. And we started, remember we left that tail long at the beginning, and we've got a tail long here at the end as well. And that's because we need to cut and match these in a specific way. And so let's take a look at that. So here in the middle, the point where we started and the point where we've ended, we're just gonna find a place in the center of that, and we're gonna cut our tail loose. And what's really neat about this is if you will open your binding strip and lay it flat, that's the distance that we'll need to cut the other strip off. So then you'll take your other strip and lay it flat against your quilt and make sure that they're laying really nicely together. And then right here at the edge of that strip that we just cut, we're going to cut the other one off. So these guys overlap by the distance of the width of the strip that you used on your binding. And we like to use that 2.5 inch binding. So that's this length here that it overlaps is 2.5 inches. So once you have that overlap cut, what we need to do is splice them together. So you're gonna take the one piece and open it and lay it out to the side here. And then we're gonna take our other piece and, making sure not to twist this around, we're going to open it up so that we see the wrong side. And you may have to gather your quilt so that these will match, but you're gonna lay them in same edge on the two sides. And here what we'll do is we're gonna sew on this diagonal right across here. And you can use a marking pin if you're new, but what you wanna do is go from corner to corner and sew a straight line. So it's also helpful sometimes if you pin these in place. So if we pin on the two sides, that'll keep that nice and square for us as well. And after that, we will take it over to the sewing machine and pin those together. All right, so we went and I showed you how to put these ends back together. So here we are going to sew, and I've drawn a line down that diagonal that we talked about, and I'm going to sew right on that diagonal. So we'll just put it under our foot, leaving my needle in center position and sewing down that piece. And then I will back stitch a little bit on our front end just to make sure that we hold that together. Okay, and then I'll pull it out and pull our pins loose here. And before I cut this end off, especially if you're new, I want to make sure that this is actually going to lay the way we need it to, and that we haven't twisted it in some way. So I will pull it back taut and make sure that it lays against my quilt and it doesn't have a twist in it. So now that it looks good, what we'll do is take and cut out about 1/4 inch from that line that we sewed to create that 1/4 inch seam. You could certainly use a rotary cutter, but just using a pair of scissors is okay too. So I'm gonna take it over to the iron real quick and iron my seam flat on this piece, and then fold my binding back over so that all of this lays flat and it doesn't have that bulk in it. And then we'll come and finish sewing up our side. So we're back from the ironing board, and I've finished piecing those together, and I've also finished sewing down that seam so that we have the binding completely sewed to the back of our quilt. And now we're ready to finish that up. And here's our second trick to getting our binding to look so nice. We're going to use Baby Lock's bi-level foot, and that's what creates that nice flat seam on our binding. So first of all, we need to just change out our feet. And one of the tricks on our bi-level foot, when we set our shank down on top of the foot, gotta get it there, so one of the tricks to using our bi-level foot is on the side that it's high, it doesn't like to grab the shank. And so if you'll just grab that right-hand side and flip it up, get it underneath, it'll grab onto the shank. So a lot of people have trouble getting the bi-level foot on, but if you'll grab this front corner, it'll pop on. And what's nice about the bi-level foot is it's higher on this left side to accommodate the thickness of the binding. So we're gonna take now and roll our quilt to the front. All right. And here where we sewed our seam, we can see our seam line. And what we're gonna do is take our binding and roll it to the front of our quilt, and we're going to just cover up that seam line that we stitched and put it underneath our bi-level foot. So here under our bi-level foot, we have the little mark on the front left corner, and that's what you're gonna line up the edge of your binding with. So we're just over the line that we sewed, and we have our binding lined up with the notch on our bi-level foot. The other thing that's important here is to make sure that you move your needle all the way to the left. And after we have that set, we are going to just sew down that side. You want to make sure that you don't really pull at this binding over, or it's not going to lay really straight. So again, we're just over the line that we sewed. Okay. And if you have extra strings on your quilt, we can just trim those up before we get to that corner. This one has quite a few. And then here at our corner, we'll keep coming at it. Okay, and then you want to take and bevel that corner. So we're just laying it flat, and then you're going to pull that front edge up over the top of it so that it makes the really pretty bevel on the corner. And then you're just going to continue rolling it into your foot. And because it's that metal foot, it's a little bit hard to see, and it may try to roll on you. So you can just stop and lift up your foot and tuck it under. And then you just want to go into that side seam a little bit. If you turn it and it's not far enough, then you can just turn it back and take another step and keep turning till you get to here. Once you make that corner, again, we're going to line up with that seam and keep going down. And we are going to continue this process until we get around to the front of our quilt. So we've made it completely around our quilt, and one of the nicest things about the way that we do our binding is that it's still going to look the same if you're on the front as if you're on the back. So you can see that binding piece, our thread, is on the binding and not on the back fabric. And so that's one of the things that we really like about the way that we bind. So I hope that you feel more inspired to take on your next project and that you know how to create just the perfect binding. We hope you really enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. And if you want to receive those notifications, make sure you click on the bell icon. Thanks for letting us turn your inspiration into a creation.